Welcome to Norton's Fulbright's YouTube channel, Energy Transition, The Pace of Change. I am Julien Bocobza, a partner in our London office, and today I've got the pleasure of hosting Tatsushi Amano, Director General at the Research Department of the Japan Bank for International Cooperation, JBIC. Amano-san, welcome. Perhaps before we start, would you mind introducing yourself and what JBIC is doing?
Okay, my name is Tatsushi Amano. I'm a Director General of the Strategic Research Department of JBIC. Our institution is a government organization which supports Japanese business in overseas countries. Within JBIC, Strategic Research Department is working on various research projects. In particular, our main focus is the activities of the Japanese industry and geopolitical issues. Energy transition is very much relevant to our research projects.
Great, thank you very much. So what really does the energy transition mean to you and to JBIC?
Energy transition is not something which has happened very recently. We have seen gradual shift in many areas even before the Paris Convention in 2015. Speaking of my personal background, when I joined JBIC more than 20 years ago, the most popular JBIC operations among young JBIC officers were oil and gas projects or large-scale thermal power projects, given that everyone considered those projects are necessary for the Japanese business and host countries. I was apparently one of them. But since then, I have experienced the various posts, and I once led a team working on renewables and other low-carbon technologies, including solar, offshore wind, and nuclear power. And now my team, Strategic Research Department, is closely watching the development of hydrogen business. In this context, energy transition perhaps means the transition of my professional focus.
Thank you. And so you mentioned obviously that you're a bank as part of the activities. So how is the energy transition impacting, in your view, the finance sector?
Financial sector is under enormous pressure from both market and regulators. ESG investors are requesting commercial banks to shift its operational focus in a carbon neutral direction. My team has carried out a research project on how the Japanese industry has been working on sustainable development goals, SDGs, for what kind of reasons. An interesting finding was capital intensive sectors tend to feel strong market pressure to undertake SDGs. I think this also applies to financial sector, which is naturally very capital intensive. Regulators and central banks are also trying to push financial institutions to take into account climate change risks as part of their risk management.
Thank you. And how is JBIC responding to those issues?
JBIC, as a governmental agency, is required to work in accordance with the Japanese governmental policy. Last October, Prime Minister Suga announced carbon neutral goal by 2050. In December, the Japanese government unveiled its green growth strategy and identified 14 key strategic sectors. Among them, 4 sectors are energy related, namely offshore wind, fuel ammonia, hydrogen, and nuclear. Please note that the Japanese government views carbon neutral goal in the context of growth strategy. This global trend and both EU and US are moving in a similar direction. It should be also noted that carbon neutral is no longer a matter exclusively relevant to energy sector. The Japanese government's green growth strategy involves a wide variety of industry as key strategic sectors. This implies, I think, carbon neutral goal prompts the change in our daily life.
So you mentioned some growth, which is obviously very important. So in your view, if we look at the next 5 years, what are the biggest opportunities, but also to be balanced, perhaps, what are the biggest challenges?
Let me start with challenges. Financial institutions will face serious consequences if they fail to align itself with global trend. This March, disclosure guidelines on sustainable finance came into force in European Union. EU, US, and Japan all announced its intention to consider carbon border adjustment mechanism. Under these circumstances, underperforming companies with respect to carbon emission are likely to become costly clients for financial institutions. On the other hand, biggest opportunities lies in technology innovation. The Japanese government strategy also includes a plan to establish $20 billion fund for supporting the tech innovation. Japanese government 2 years ago revised the Science, Technology and Innovation Act, and it will come into force this April. Under this new legislation, many national science laboratories are able to provide seed investment to startups. It has often been argued that the biggest problem of the Japanese startup promotion policies is limited availability of experts who can judge new ideas and technologies. But this new legislation is expected to involve more technology experts. I am not technology expert, obviously, but I have been working with engineering experts in one of the Japanese government subsidy programs for the past 2 years. Based on my experience, it is essential to financial institutions to extend networks with technology experts if they want to explore new business opportunities in innovative technologies. But having said that, in today's world, political divide overshadows various policies, including energy transition. Public awareness about climate change and energy transition is very different between people in urban areas and rural areas, rich people and poor people, and highly educated and less educated. It should be noted that the impact of energy transition will not be equal. Less resourced people and businesses are likely to be vulnerable to energy transition, and energy transition should be just and equitable. Unless otherwise, it will become very difficult to build a political consensus for energy transition. And this will be a big challenge for policymakers and business leaders.
Amano-san, thank you very much. That was extremely interesting. And thank you all for listening. Please don't miss the next episode.
Thank you very much.